Here we are again for another show about aviation. It's been 2 weeks. It goes by pretty quick, and Martin is with me in the studio at last. Hello, Martin.
Yes, I am. Back in New Zealand.
Gosh, it's just like you were always here, but you weren't. I mean, that Skype is getting pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing what a microphone on a regular little laptop can do now, hey?
In a not-so-noisy room.
Yeah.
There you go. Anyway, so plenty has been happening in this world, and let's start here at home. Air New Zealand, a couple of things. 2 new 787-9s on order have been announced or confirmed. And also a lot of talk about a new route to, I think they're describing it as the Americas.
Yeah.
People are speculating Chicago and a few other destinations. We've always thought that there was an opportunity to go to South America. I'm still feeling that it will be a South American destination given that Singapore connection. What do you think?
Yes, I agree. There's been a lot of talk of Houston, Dallas, Chicago.
Again, why?
Yeah, absolutely.
For an airline like Air New Zealand.
What would anybody from New Zealand want to do in Houston?
Connects with the United, doesn't it? Because that's
but so does LA.
Yeah, of course, and so does Chicago, and so does, and of course the Qantas Dallas connection is there because of the One World, and that's the American hub. Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can go anywhere in the world from there.
So, unfortunately, we've got no idea, but we do tend to sort of discount the what do you say, the conventional wisdom.
The North American destinations.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's on the western seaboard, there's Seattle. But, you know, is there much going between New Zealand and Seattle? And they go to Vancouver anyway. Yeah. So that's only, 100 miles north?
I mean, Colorado was spoken about quite a lot. In fact, the city of...
Denver?
Was it Denver? Yeah, I believe
it would have to be Denver, wouldn't it?
Denver. They sent out a delegation to try and encourage Air New Zealand to fly there, didn't they?
Could be that. There's skiing.
Certainly
Kiwis like to ski.
Kiwis do like to ski, but apparently Air New Zealand have discounted that. And given when these new planes will arrive, and given that they'll have to have a slightly different configuration from the current 787-900s, which are high-density inter-regional, sort of Japan, places like that, by 2017, when they're due to arrive, they will have the extended ETOPS.
Right.
So they'll probably be configured slightly differently and be able to do enormous long ranges, which is what the 787-900 was designed to do.
Who said, though, that they're going to use 787s? They might use their 777s.
They won't use the 200s because they'll be getting a bit long in the tooth by then. I think it'll be, for route proving, it'll be perfect. Okay. 280, 275 seats to somewhere in South America. Be a good plane for that.
What, Buenos Aires? Or it'd have to be somewhere where it had reasonable facilities. Or it'd be Chile or Buenos Aires or Brazil, wouldn't it?
I think the destination...
Or Mexico? No, Mexico's too close to the US.
If it is South America, I think it'll all depend on where Singapore Airlines would like Air New Zealand to fly to. Because you think for a Singaporean wanting to get to South America, that would actually be a very convenient flight. 10, 12 hours to Auckland, jump on the next plane and you're there, rather than a very long flight from Singapore to the west coast of America and then an equally long flight.
And also you get New Zealand bundled in.
Absolutely.
And that's a place for a stopover, isn't it? For a few days in Auckland or around?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting. We've been wondering in the past what Air New Zealand are paying for these 787s. They were a launch customer, the launch customer for the 9, weren't they? So that must always put you in a pretty good price position.
I think they're getting a fantastic price on those planes. I mean, the current list price is something like $270 million US dollars. There's always a hefty discount, 40%, but I wouldn't be surprised if Air New Zealand's getting somewhere south of 50% on those. Because when they bought them, Boeing was still fondly believing that they were going to be able to assemble them in 3 days and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think they're getting these planes very, very, very cheaply indeed.
And the timing of this announcement would be what you would expect from the amount of time they've had to put the aircraft into service and see how it works. So obviously they're satisfied. They like what they see. And the plans that they've had, conditional on the aircraft meeting its performance or exceeding it or whatever, and they've made their move.
Yeah. And they've got another 6 in the pocket, so to speak. Another 6 options there.
They've got 10.
And they've taken another 2.
Yeah, and they've got how many more?
So it's 18.
18, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's every 767 and every 777-200 replaced, essentially, isn't it?
There you go.
Over that time period.
And 2 configurations, the current configuration with 300 seats for the medium range routes, and then a 4 or 5, or maybe the rest, configured with slightly less but much longer range.
The thing is, though, with slightly less, you're going to have to either up your prices find a better yield somehow, or go to a destination that has a pent-up demand that you can...
Yeah.
Because how many seats will they have to eliminate to achieve the range?
Yeah, well, if you look at the United 787-900, which is flying Los Angeles to Melbourne, that's 252 seats.
Right.
It's not very many.
Yeah, depends on what it's costing them, I guess.
And as the oil price continues to fall, and if the planes are as cheap as I think they are, they can pretty much fly wherever they want, for whatever they want.
Interesting you mentioned the oil price. That's long been the difference between profit and loss in the airline business, especially in the last decade or so. I think it's down to, the $70 a barrel region now, and the psychology seems to go, could either stay around this area or even go a bit lower yet. It could be a golden era for airlines emerging here.
Well, see how long it lasts.
A sweet spot.
I think America's really enjoying their energy independence now that they're producing almost as much oil as they need.
And exporting too.
And beginning to export. Obviously, Saudi Arabia and the OPEC states are going to try and drive the price down to the point below which it makes sense for America to extract its oil. But I've got the feeling America will continue to extract that oil, basically whatever it costs.
That's what I made the point. The psychology seems to be going south, Yeah. I saw somewhere that Saudi Arabia's point of pain is $49 a barrel.
Yeah, and last week it touched 66.
So,
And everyone's happy because the main... the disadvantaged party in all of this is Russia. They're getting hammered.
That's a 40% reduction, if it all flows through, in your fuel overhead. The bigger airlines are going to be saving billions of dollars. They're not shifting their... no, we are starting to see some competitive pricing, aren't we? Do you think it's driven by that?
I think it is. I think the airlines are seeing that they've got a bit of wiggle room and they can offer some pretty good fares. I mean, Singapore Airlines was offering $2,200 return to Europe. As was Emirates. I think China Southern was offering $1,500 returns to Europe.
They had an incredible deal going recently.
And they're just seeing the opportunity. And interesting, the one airline, huge airline, American Airlines, they haven't been doing any fuel hedging since it didn't work for them last time.
Yeah, I noticed that.
And they're taking immediate advantage. As the price falls, they make more money.
I read about the fuel hedging, and I was quite amazed at how much it actually cost the airlines.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
And if they get it wrong,
it costs them hundreds
even
of
a
millions.
little bit wrong, costs them a lot of money.
Yeah.
Especially if the fuel keeps
that's what happened to
going down. You get caught in the worst of all worlds, don't you?
That's what happened to American Airlines in 2008. And they came out of that, and the CEO just said, forget it, it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
Because some airlines, a lot of airlines and a lot of companies made money out of oil hedging, and at some stage came to the conclusion that instead of it being just an insurance policy and an expensive one at that, they tried to turn it into a profit center and became oil traders.
Yeah.
And it didn't work.
Back to Air New Zealand, I see they've been awarded Airline of the Year by one of the magazines or publications, so that's all good. And I think courtesy of Mr. Luxon, you got a nice little package in the mail to celebrate the 75th anniversary coming up, a little booklet, I think. And,
yes, I did. I got a bottle of wine and 2 glasses and a book commemorating the 75 years of Air New Zealand.
Which we had to leaf through.
It's a very nice booklet.
Well, pictures are too small.
There are obviously some constraints, but it's quite, it's nicely done.
When the bullet point dates are bigger than the archive pictures, you know that the tail is wagging the dog, Martin.
I think you're being overly critical. I think it's quite a nice
Never
booklet.
let an ad man prepare an historical document.
Yes.
It'll never come off. And if you get the chance, folks, to look at this thing, spot the DC-8 FS, that is flight sim still, that someone's put in there, thinking it's the real thing.
Yes, there is a picture of a DC-8 on Climb Out.
We've put it under the magnifying glass and sort of verified that it's not correct, but you've also noticed that the graphics aren't quite right for the stage of flight.
Yes, because it's shown in Climb Out very close to ground, and about half the window blinds are drawn.
Yeah.
And if you look at the model, well, we think it's a model. If you look at
we know it's a model.
We're pretty sure it's a model.
No, I'm totally sure.
Yeah.
I've seen the picture before.
The shading on the gear door doesn't look right.
I see.
It's a flight sim model.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And, people who don't know this area could be easily mistaken, which tells me it was just put together by an ad person who didn't know anything about the history of aviation in New Zealand.
I think it's safe to say Paul hates the booklet.
Well, I don't hate it. I just think they could have done a better job. Anyway, okay, so happy birthday, Air New Zealand. And let's not forget NAC,
Let's not forget NAC.
because NAC are a big part of the...
It's got some great pictures in there of the flying boats and that, doesn't it?
Oh, isn't that Solent the most amazing... In fact, I'm going to bring a picture up for our YouTube viewers now of one of those teal Solents. Isn't that the most amazing looking piece of plane you've ever seen?
It does look pretty cool, especially that shot over Wellington.
Those engines, the old Centaurus engines there, and there's something about the look of that.
Yeah.
I mean, even though it looks like it's from, another era,
Yes.
which it is. It was 8 hours across the...
It looks like
Tasman and
it
those
should
things.
have masts.
Well, it sort of does.
Yeah,
All those radio aerials look like masts,
Yeah.
don't they?
As part of the whole 75th anniversary and all of this, they interviewed the CEO of Air New Zealand,
Mr. Luxon.
Mr. Luxon, and he had some very interesting things to say about the current state of Air New Zealand, which is very good.
Yep.
And especially compared to competitors in the local area. He had a bit of a shot at Qantas with their low cost, they've got Jetstar
Yep.
and the full service airline Qantas. He says Air New Zealand's been far more successful with their particular group of passengers or type of passenger by combining the two products on the one aircraft. So you can buy a works ticket or you can just buy a seat ticket.
Yeah.
The price differential will be quite big, but they're all flying Air New Zealand. They're all getting Air New Zealand service. They're all experiencing largely the same service.
Right.
He thinks that's much better than splitting your airline down the middle
And
having-
cannibalising
and cannibalising yourself.
your customer base. Yeah.
Yes, and he actually, Qantas is always complaining, they've had this problems because they're an end-of-line airline and blah, 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 stuck down the end of the world.
Excuses.
Yeah, and Luxon's actually saying, well, you could see that as an advantage.
Yeah.
Because, you come here, someone's got to take you somewhere else, and why wouldn't it be Air New Zealand?
Yeah, yeah.
And some of the comments were saying, well, there's no reason why Air New Zealand couldn't compete with the Middle Eastern three. Just be slightly different.
On
and
brand.
Go via different airports,
Yeah.
and they're in a very, very good... very good position.
Interesting.
Yes, I think I thought that was interesting because I think we can see that we've seen this all over the world that every airline that's opened up a low-cost carrier division,
Hasn't worked.
it just has never really worked, has it?
In fact, I can't think of one.
No.
They all went through a sort of like a natural lifespan, Because in America, there was TED, there was Song.
Yeah, they're all gone, aren't they?
Yeah, they all went. I flew TED once.
And it's quite interesting that
They had everything on board was United.
Yeah, Air Canada started one. Jazz is still going, but
Right.
not that well. Interesting that Singapore's just opened up a low-cost international, Scoot, using
Yeah.
their old 777s. It'd be interesting to see how that works.
But
out.
they're limited to only one part of the world, really, aren't
Yes.
they? That's to serve one market only.
Yeah, I think
And
that's to go
and
against AirAsia X as
Yeah,
well.
and to get the travellers in the Asia area travelling.
And it is interesting that, so you've got Ryanair and Southwest, they are true low cost and they'll never want to be anything else. But the other airlines that started as low cost, which was Virgin Australia and JetBlue, they've all gone up
They've
market.
morphed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, how long is Jetstar going to last then?
I think Jetstar was always set up as a stick to try and beat Qantas into shape.
But once Qantas is in shape,
I think Jetstar will be reabsorbed.
or will it just be, again, put out to compete with AirAsia X and Scoot in the Asian area?
If, then it would get a lot smaller.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
if you
lots
could
more.
run the whole thing under the Qantas brand and once you've licked it into shape, why wouldn't you? I mean,
Yeah.
because Jetstar's actually upset a lot of people. You've got people that have bought Qantas tickets
Ending up on
to
Jetstar.
Bali. Yeah, ending up on Jetstar, going via Brisbane and having to carry their luggage between the terminals because they don't interline.
Well, that'll teach people for going to Bali and supporting that corrupt country.
Well, there is that, yeah.
Yeah.
There is that.
All right, Qantas, a whole bunch of problems, which I feel a bit sorry for them, Martin, because they're actually starting to report some good news and numbers. But they've had a whole series of fiddly little things go wrong with, I think, now 4 flights.
Yeah.
2 A380s. I got to say, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, and I'm sure our listeners will agree, the sensationalism used to report these incidents is just over the top. I think it's common knowledge by most travellers these days that if an aircraft depressurizes, you're going to have to descend quickly. I think everybody gets that the cabin altitude will skyrocket if the thing depressurizes and you have to get lower. Everyone knows that. Yet every time a standard emergency descent is initiated, it's described as horrifying, terrifying, plunging. We thought we were going to die, all that sort of stuff. I'm over it. Here's my appeal to the news media. Grow up and start reporting these things properly. There you go.
Interesting that some people are saying Twitter kind of saved a lot of that, because while the newspapers were going on about how the plane had to plunge down and panic passengers and everything, there was another passenger on the plane taking pictures and posting them to his Twitter account, which obviously only happened once they landed.
Yeah.
And it shows you the passengers during this plunging
Very
down.
relaxed.
Well, actually, sorting out their luggage in the overhead lockers, because they'd just been told they're going into Perth instead of into Sydney.
Yeah.
And so everyone was wandering around the cabin, checking their luggage, putting their stuff away. It seems to be a failure of at least one of the air conditioning packs that wasn't going to be able to keep the cabin pressure up for long enough, so the pilot decided to descend and put into Perth. Nothing happened.
As you would.
Absolutely nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
There was no drop in cabin altitude. There would have been, had they stayed up there that long, but they noticed it was happening, saw it was happening, descended, took care of it, landed.
Then you've got this flight to Dallas, wasn't it? With the in-flight entertainment system breaking down. I think there was something up with the plumbing as well.
Apparently some of the toilets were malfunctioning.
Well, that was probably more of a problem than the in-flight entertainment system going, and they turned back after 4 hours. But even that was being linked to some sort of crisis of maintenance. I mean, it's the in-flight entertainment system. It's got nothing to do with the flying systems of the aircraft, for golly's sake.
Yes.
And a couple of, I think, 737 incidents, one with the smell of smoke in the cockpit. Well, that's unnerving, I got to say. But meantime, Alan Joyce is trying to get out the fact that, hey, next year it's looking pretty good.
Next year they're going to make some money.
Is that on a lowering of the overhead or increase in business? Because I think 25 767s out of the fleet by then.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people off the payroll.
That is. Which if you were a conspiracy theorist, if you were sort of knew how Australia worked, it wouldn't surprise me that they're having a lot of little niggling maintenance problems on the current aircraft, because some people might say that's the type of thing that happens in Australia.
Oh, you mean things happen for a reason?
Acts of light sabotage.
Things don't happen just randomly through natural entropy.
No.
They're helped along.
You stuff something down the plumbing system, you make sure the
in-flight,
in-flight thing doesn't work. I don't know that someone would go and sabotage an air conditioning pack, because that's
well, and
plainly
it
wrong.
gives away during the flight. It's pretty hard to set that up.
Yeah.
But yeah, the niggle things.
The little niggles wouldn't surprise me at all.
Or it's going out the door with it's faulty, and you just don't fix it.
Yeah.
And you know that once they get going.
But of course, I don't support that theory.
No.
Just,
No. You're just putting it forward as maybe a very low chance of it being what caused the problem. Yeah, I see what you're saying. All right. As always, a few incidents scattered around the world. This one caught my eye. Yakutia Airline 757 freighter, one of those XBA ones, I think, in Russia, had to turn back to Magadan because the big side cargo door opened in flight, according to what I'm reading here.
Better get your
An
attention.
aviation safety net. I would. Boy, and that's a big surface area up there in the wind.
Big door, and I wonder what the wind, once it gets inside the fuselage, does to the whatever's strapped down in there.
Well, it's probably not too bad. I think it was reasonably low level when it happened, but danger is, of course, it gets ripped off and damages the fuselage. Though we've seen, you remember back to United, the one out of Honolulu where the cargo door came off. I mean, the thing's still held together. And the crash of the Embraer Phenom business jet in Maryland in the past week, Martin. You used to live in that area, didn't you?
Yes, I did, and it crashed at Montgomery County Air Park, which is somewhere I'd been a few times, actually.
Oh.
Yeah, the Phenom's a tiny little sort of cut-down business jet.
Yeah, it is. It's quite a small one, actually.
Yeah, very small.
But cute, and they've done quite well with it. What actually happened there? I think they knew they had a problem trying to get back to the airport, weren't they?
Yeah, and it came down and hit a house, which is unfortunate. So 3 people on the plane died.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. 3 houses were affected, but they don't know whether anyone was home or injured at this point.
So
but I think subsequent to that, a woman on the ground has been confirmed as being killed. Which is a bit unfortunate.
Dear.
Talking about that, I was watching Flight Radar the other night, and there was a Citation X or 10.
Is that one of those really cool-looking ones?
That's the really fast, big Cessna.
Yeah, I know the one. I like those.
Yeah, and
big engines.
It had taken off from Gander,
yeah,
and it was heading off across the North Atlantic.
Yeah,
and it was at 47,000 feet and 570 knots.
Wow, that's getting along, isn't it?
It was getting along, and then I looked at a couple of planes. There was Gulfstream going direct Los Angeles to Baku, which is in Central Asia.
Yep.
That was at 48,000 feet and at 560 knots. But the most interesting was a Pilatus PC-12.
Oh, gosh. Here we go.
Herring across northern Canada at 26,000 feet and 325 knots.
That's not bad.
That's not bad at all.
That's impressive. I noticed on Airliner's net, a Virgin Atlantic A340-600, I think, was seen on flight radars clocking in at 700 knots.
Wow.
Ground speed.
Yeah.
So they must have been right up there in the old jet stream.
I had that once coming back from Singapore on a Singapore Airlines 777, and we were west of Adelaide. So we'd taken off from Singapore, flown south, then turned left to come to New Zealand. We were doing 1,140 kilometres an hour, according to the thing on the back of the seat.
Gosh, it's really getting along. I remember a DC-8 did, I think it was Brisbane to Auckland in 1 hour 58 once.
Wow.
And I think that's still the record.
Wow.
People want to check up on that?
Certainly not what I've experienced, bumping along in an A320 for 4 hours.
No. Well, those things, they were, what, Mach 0.8, 6 or 7 or 8 or something. They could go to Mach 9, I think, those old first-generation airliners. We don't talk about space too often. Maybe we should talk about it a bit more because some amazing things have happened. They've been landing things on asteroids, so on and so forth, but couldn't help but be enthralled by watching that Orion spacecraft take off a few days ago from Cape Canaveral, just like the old days. More powerful than the Saturn V, I think.
Yeah, that's a hell of a rocket, isn't it?
Yeah, boy, and didn't it just go up so smoothly?
It did.
You know, it just...
Those solid rocket boosters, once you light them, they're off, aren't they?
Yeah. And the thing was successful. They took it out to, to 6,000 miles out from the Earth?
3,600 miles, yeah.
Right. And
which is the furthest anyone's been for years.
Incredible, yeah.
Well, not anyone. There's nobody on it, but that's the furthest they've been out for a long time.
And the whole re-entry system and everything works, so all that works, though you would expect it to work, wouldn't you? I mean, there's been plenty of experience of doing this, really, when you look back. So she's all on, isn't it, really?
Yeah, there was that, which was very, very cool. And then there was landing the probe on the comet, which is just amazing.
That was very impressive.
Yeah.
For those watching the YouTube footage here of the Orion blasting off, very impressive, isn't it?
It is.
A lot of power.
Yeah. It's interesting when it first starts, it looks like someone's just lighting it with a sort of oily rag. It doesn't start crisply. I mean, that's the Saturn V. It just used to sit there and suddenly just used to explode.
Yeah.
The solid rocket boosters on the shuttle were the most amazing part of the shuttle, I thought, in terms of the raw power they delivered, but they were also the most dangerous part because they're completely unthrottleable. Yeah,
that's right. You on or off.
If they go wrong.
Or they're just on.
And as we see, if they go wrong, they go really wrong.
Kabang. Yeah, I've seen the shuttle blast off, and I tell you, the noise from those engines, it sounds like about 100 Rolls-Royce Conways at full power. You know how those old jets used to make those supersonic bangs? It's like that all the time. It's amazing.
And I've seen a plug of the fuel in them. It's rubber.
Yeah.
It's rubber and aluminium powder or something.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
All right, so we're up to our aircraft of the day, and this one is, how would you describe it? It's one of the coolest looking planes ever made, I got to say.
Yes.
And I've actually seen the very first one of this aircraft, the very first one made. It's, I think, now at the Museum of Flight in Seattle. It's a Vought aircraft.
Yep.
Carrier-based.
Yes.
But big for carriers.
Very big. Single-engined, very big.
Yeah.
Imposing aircraft. The F8.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, that's got the scoop down below, underneath the nose, right? The inlet.
Yes, chin scoop.
And I guess the most distinguishing feature of the F8 Crusader is the tilting entire wing tilt that it can do.
So it had a variable incidence main wing. You could crank the wing up by 15 degrees so that you didn't have to come nose up into a carrier.
Yeah.
So you could, basically the fuselage hung below the wing. You'd adjust the angle of the wing and the plane would basically come in almost level, nose down, straight onto the deck.
Yeah, you get next to one of these things, you realise how big they are. I know that the wing mechanism caused lots of early problems.
Yeah, well...
And I think John Glenn was one of the people involved in trying to sort that out. It was a bit of a scandal at the time. It
went into service in 1957, I believe.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Well, there must have been a few updates along the way. They would have been used in Vietnam, of course.
They updated it all the way up to the point where it briefly was considered as part of the same program for the F-15.
Oh.
They came out with a much, much hotter version, which one of the things that shot it down is it didn't have 360-degree visibility out of the cockpit because the cockpit was a step, so you couldn't see behind you.
Yeah.
And one of the requirements for the air superiority fighter, which
Was you
became
to
the
be able to see
S-50, you
behind.
had to be able to see. But the pilots, apparently, they love this plane. They loved it. There was the subsonic version, I forget what that was called, and that's just retired.
So how much in common did the F8 have with the A7, which, from memory, looked quite a bit similar, though was smaller? And did they have the wing thing going on?
No, the A7 didn't have the variable incidence wing, and the A7, well, because it was an attack aircraft, it was used extensively in Vietnam, and it's actually just been retired by the Greek Air Force.
Yeah.
They've just retired the final one.
I remember looking over the one, which was the very first one built up in Seattle, and I noticed how small the undercarriage was.
Very narrow.
Tiny little wheels. And
Yeah.
you think, man, you'd have to be careful putting this thing down.
Yeah, high pressure, very, very small, very high pressure wheels.
And that's really because, I guess, of the high wing. There was nowhere to retract the gear into.
Yeah, and it was big. As you say, it was big.
Yeah.
It had a huge engine. The A7, which I thought was also, because it looked very similar, it looked a bit simpler. That was quite a bit smaller. It was sort of like a 20% scaled
was
down
like a
version
compact
of the F8.
version.
Yeah.
So Mach 2, if I remember rightly, I think about 1,200 built, which seemed to be about the normal production run for these types back in that day. I guess that covers X amount of Navy squadrons to fill the 5 or 6 big carriers they had operating at the time.
It must have been fantastic being an aircraft producer back in the 60s and that, because whatever you built, they were going to buy 1,000.
Yeah.
And then retire them quite quickly.
Yeah, quite quickly, and maybe give you another version of it.
Yeah.
One-for-one replacement.
One thing that was cool about the F8 is it had those sidewinders mounted on the side of the front fuselage. Yeah, I remember.
That looked cool.
I remember as a kid building a model. I thought, I really like that.
Great location for the sidewinders.
When I was a kid, I used to build a lot of models, and someone gave me, I forget what the scale was.
132 maybe.
But I was really happy because it was the biggest model I'd ever been given.
Yeah.
And it was actually
Yeah,
an F8.
132nd was a great scale.
And I remember it had, I really messed up on the undercarriage. It ended up just like a ball of glue and half-melted
I hate
plastic.
it when that happens.
Yeah.
That's when you want to throw it at the wall.
Well, in the end, I made it with the undercarriage folded up. So.
Okay, airborne.
But I was really unhappy about that because I really wanted to try and get those little wheels sitting on the wheels.
My brother had a brilliant Tamiya 32nd scale, I think it was, F-14 Tomcat that he made. Beautiful, lovely piece of moulding, you know, and big.
I've got a model still that I've never built. It's the HP-42.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Our feature aircraft of some shows ago.
Yeah.
Oh, well, why don't you start that as a project and we can take pictures and show progression.
Yeah, yeah.
So, our aircraft for the day is the Vought F8 Crusader. All right, we've come to the end of our time again, our allotted time. I guess we'll be kicking around, maybe doing a few episodes over Christmas, Martin.
We will have to do one the week of Christmas.
Special Christmas edition.
Christmas special.
You have Santa flying.
Yeah.
In the meantime, this is Paul Brennan in Wellington and
Martin Noakes in Wellington.
there you go. We'll see you again soon.
Cheers.